All right, welcome back to Binge Guide. You know the deal, right? Finding that next show that's got you hooked, the one you can't stop thinking about. That's what we do here.
That's right, we dive deep.
Today's deep dive, buckle up, because we're going full throttle into the action comedy Fight or Flight. This is not your typical rom-com or feel-good flick. We're talking high stakes, adrenaline pumping, and a whole lot of chaos, all crammed into a trans-Pacific flight.
Yeah, think like Die Hard, but at 37,000 feet.
With more than just one bad guy.
Oh yeah, way more. Imagine a plane full of assassins, all after the same target.
Our mission today, same as always, we're giving you the intel you need to decide if Fight or Flight is worth the hype, and trust me, there is a lot of hype around this one, but we're doing this spoiler-free, of course. We want you to experience the twists and turns fresh, just as the filmmakers intended. So let's break it down, shall we? First up, the premise. This is where things get interesting.
This movie centers around Josh Hartnett, playing a character named Lucas Reyes. He's an American agent, but not your typical hero. He's got some serious baggage, let's just say.
A shattering crack, to quote one of the sources.
Exactly. Something went down, something big, and it basically got him exiled, blacklisted. We find him in Thailand, kind of drowning his sorrows, until he gets a call from his former boss, played by Sackhoff.
Always great to see her on screen. She plays Catherine, and she's the one who throws him this lifeline, this mission that could be his chance at redemption.
A chance to clear his name, potentially.
The mission involves a high-value terrorist target known as the Ghost. Super secretive, nobody knows their true identity. All they know is the Ghost is on this flight from Bangkok to San Francisco.
And Reyes has to find them.
On the plane. Talk about pressure. But he does have a little help, right, with the flight attendants.
Yeah, Danny Ashok is playing Royce, and Charithra Chandran, you might know her from Bridgerton or Dune. Prophecy, she plays Isha, and they're both flight attendants on this crazy flight.
Now, here's where it gets really wild. This flight is not your average group of passengers heading home for the holidays.
No, not at all. The plane is packed with other mercenaries and assassins from all corners of the globe.
Apparently, word got out about the Ghost being on that flight, and every assassin who's anyone is there to try and take them out. Some for money, some for reputation, and some, well, their motives are still a bit of a mystery.
And, just to add to the drama, a few of them might even be after Reyes himself. It's like a powder keg, ready to explode.
That's a good analogy. All these dangerous individuals stuck together, thousands of feet in the air, with nowhere to go. The tension must be off the charts.
You can just imagine the claustrophobia, the close quarters combat, the betrayals, the constantly shifting alliances. It's a recipe for absolute mayhem.
And at the center of it all is Josh Hartnett. It's interesting to see this kind of resurgence in his career. I mean, we saw him in Oppenheimer, he had a role in Trap last year, now Fight or Flight. He seems to be picking some really interesting projects.
Yeah, and from the early reviews, it sounds like he delivers a really compelling performance in this one.
There's this word that keeps coming up, humbling. Like he's not afraid to make fun of the situation, of his character's flaws, but he's also totally believable as this action hero pulling off these incredible stunts.
That balance is important. You need that vulnerability, that humor to make the character relatable, especially in this kind of over-the-top scenario. Otherwise, it could get too intense, too unbelievable.
And it's not just about looks, right?
Yeah.
Hartnett apparently went through some pretty intense physical training for the role. Apparently, the fight scenes on the plane were so demanding, so claustrophobic, that he actually said this was the toughest physical challenge he's ever faced.
Wow, tougher than his earlier action roles, huh? That says a lot.
It does. It shows commitment, a willingness to go all in. And you know what? That kind of dedication translates onto the screen.
Definitely. So we've got a high-stakes premise, an intriguing protagonist, and a impressive lead actor. Now, where does this film fit in terms of genre? It's being described as an action comedy, which sounds pretty straightforward, but some of the descriptions go a bit deeper.
Oh yeah, one source even called it a love letter to B-movie bliss.
Yeah, and another one more directly just called it straight up Assassins on a Plane. I think that kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
It does paint a pretty clear picture. It tells you to expect over-the-top action, a healthy dose of humor, maybe not to take things too seriously.
That B-movie element is key. It's a deliberate stylistic choice, I think. They're not trying to be a gritty, realistic thriller. They want to be fun, entertaining, a little tongue-in-cheek.
And speaking of comparisons, one name that keeps coming up is John Wick. Which makes sense, given some of the producers have ties to that franchise.
Right. Basil Iwernick, who produced the John Wick films, is on board for Fight or Flight.
Yeah.
And there's something about the way Hartnett's character is being portrayed, something about the action sequences that just screams John Wick.
Yeah, that sleek, efficient, almost balletic style of fighting. Plus, the action choreography is by Brahim Chab, who recently worked on Monkey Man, which had some really impressive fight scenes. So we can expect some top-notch action for sure.
Definitely. And it's not just John Wick either. There are comparisons to Bullet Train too, especially with the whole confined setting, multiple assassins with different agendas thing.
Right, so like they're taking that classic locker room mystery and cranking it up to 1,000. Or, as one source put it, creating this suspense de spazio-chiuso.
Nice. So yeah, it sounds like they're blending elements of a thriller, hardcore action, a dash of international espionage, all set within this incredibly tense, confined space of a passenger plane. It's a recipe for a wild ride.
So what about the action itself? What can we expect in terms of tone and style? From what I've gathered, it sounds pretty intense. One review called it savage, enthralling, and fueled by carnage.
Whoa, that's pretty intense. And another one said it never lets up, like it's just constant action, one thrilling sequence after another.
Yeah, it's being described as a live-action, frenetic comic strip with gloriously bloody action, like a Tarantino film almost.
And apparently, anything and everything on that plane becomes a weapon. We're talking seatbelts, laptops, even, get this, a chainsaw.
A chainsaw on a plane. That's a new one.
Right. Talk about going all out. It definitely sounds like they're pushing the boundaries, both in terms of creativity and just sheer over-the-top violence.
Now, there is a bit of a caveat here. Some of the early reviews mention that the film can be pretty campy at times, which, can be fun, but it can also be a bit divisive. Not everyone loves that kind of self-aware, tongue-in-cheek humor.
Right, and apparently some of the supporting actors might be going a little over the top with their performances, which could add to that campy vibe.
Right.
It all depends on how well it's balanced.
Exactly. So who's behind this wild ride? Who are the masterminds behind Fight or Flight? Well, it's actually a feature film directorial debut for James Madigan.
Really? That's interesting considering his background.
Yeah, he's got a lot of experience in visual effects. He's worked on films like The Hunger Games, Fast and Furious 9. He was also a second unit director on G.I. Joe, Retaliation.
So he's definitely comfortable with action and large-scale spectacle. That VFX background could be really interesting visually.
For sure. Now, the screenplay was written by Brooks McLaren, who wrote How It Ends, and DJ Catrona, who you might recognize as an actor from Shazam.
Yeah.
And from Death Till Dawn. It's always cool to see actors step into the writing world.
Yeah, they often bring a unique perspective.
Absolutely. And of course, we can't forget Basil Iwernick, the producer we mentioned earlier. His involvement with the John Wick films definitely adds some serious action credibility to the project.
And let's not forget the action choreographer, Brahim Chab. He just did Monkey Man, which had some truly mind-blowing fight scenes.
So yeah, the team behind the camera is definitely stacked with talent and experience in action and visual storytelling. That's a good sign.
It is. Now let's talk about the cast. We've already mentioned Josh Hartnett, Katie Sackhoff as Catherine, and then there's Charithra Chandran, who's either playing a flight attendant or the ghost, depending on which source you believe.
Yeah, that's a mystery they're keeping under wraps, and it's a smart move. Adds to the intrigue.
Absolutely. Then there's Danny Ashok playing Royce, the other flight attendant, and he's going to have his hands full, I'm sure.
No kidding, stuck on a plane with all these assassins.
Exactly. Then you've got Julian Kostov, who apparently has a really standout performance. Marco Zaror, who's an absolute beast when it comes to action scenes. You might recognize him from John Wick, Chapter 4, and The Fist of the Condor.
And the list goes on. Rebecca Johnston, Sanjeev Kohli from The Rig, Juju Chansito, she was in Wu Assassins, Nora Trokan from R.I.P.D. 2, Rise of the Damned. And there's a mention of Caitlin Boyer possibly playing a mercenary, although her role isn't clear yet.
It's a huge cast, a real who's who of action and thriller veterans. The dynamic between all these characters, especially in that confined setting, is going to be fascinating to see play out.
Definitely. So when and where can people see this action extravaganza? Well, it's already been released in the UK on Sky Cinema. But for those of us in the US, Fight or Flight hits theaters on May 9th.
Courtesy of Vertical Entertainment, so not too long to wait.
And the early buzz, well, it's looking pretty good. Critics seem to be enjoying it so far.
The reactions are mixed, but mostly positive. Most of the praise is for the action, of course, and for Hartnett's performance.
One review called the action sequences slick and silly. saying they definitely live up to the John Wick and Bullet Train comparisons. That's high praise.
It is. And right now, it's sitting at a perfect 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, though, to be fair, that's based on a very small number of reviews.
Yeah, it's still early. But Empire magazine called it a solid bit of high-concept B-movie fun. They also praise Hartnett, saying he makes a credible action hero, and James Madigan, saying he's a genre director to watch.
High praise from Empire. And Digital Spy called it a violent assassins on a plane romp, saying Hartnett has the best time with the chainsaw.
So the consensus seems to be, if you like high-octane action, over-the-top scenarios, a little bit of campy humor, and Josh Hartnett wielding a chainsaw, then Fight or Flight is definitely worth checking out.
It sounds like the filmmakers knew exactly what kind of movie they wanted to make, and they went for it. And if it's done right, it could be a really fun, entertaining, and maybe even a little bit thought-provoking experience.
Well, there you have it, our deep dive into Fight or Flight. Will Lucas Reyes find redemption? Who is the ghost? How many people will get taken out with that chainsaw? We'll have to wait and see.
May 9th in theaters.
Don't miss it. And that's it for Binge Guide, your shortcut to finding your next show. Until next time, happy watching.